Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in a moment. We're just letting the Zoom room fill in. Thank you for joining us this evening for our presentation of 21 Steps. Okay. Alrighty, I think we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. Hello. Welcome to PNP Live. My name is Margaret Orto, and I'm the events coordinator in the Children and Teens Department at Politics and Prose. Thank you so much for tuning into this virtual format where we continue to bring authors and new books to you. I have the pleasure of hosting our event this evening, and I'm delighted to welcome our guests, Jeff Gottesfeld and Matt Tavares, for this special Memorial Day event and for a discussion of their newest book together, 21 Steps. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. You can click the link we will drop into the chat to get your own copy of 21 Steps. And then also, if you have a question for our guests, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. At the end of the presentation, Jeff and Matt will have time to answer some of your questions. You can also upvote the questions you like and want answered. Now, onto the event you're waiting for. Jeff Gottesfeld is an acclaimed writer whose work has won awards from the American Library Association, the Writers Guild of America, and the National Council for the Social Studies. He has previously written for adult, teen, middle grade, and picture book audiences. His books include No Steps Behind and The Tree in the Courtyard. Matt Tavares is the author-illustrator of Crossing Niagara, Henry Aaron's Dream, There Goes Ted Williams, Becoming Babe Ruth, Growing Up Pedro, as well as Zachary's Ball, Oliver's Game, and Mudball. In addition, he is the creator of the modern Christmas tales Red and Lulu and the New York Times bestseller Dasher. He has also illustrated numerous books written by other authors. It's my pleasure to turn the event over to them. Take it away, Jeff and Matt.
Thanks so much for having us. It's really an honor to be part of your bookstore. I can't tell you the number of videos I've watched of famed historians and political figures talking here. So if you think I'm a little nervous, I am because of that. It's also great to be here for this book as we head into Memorial Day weekend, and not just Memorial Day weekend, but the 100th Memorial Day since the tomb was established on November 11th, 1921. The centennial of the tomb will be this coming November. I get asked a lot how I came to write this book and why I chose to write it, and it's kind of a two-part answer. There's the specific part, and then there's the thematic part. So I'll start with the thematic part, and then we'll lead to the specific. So thematically, this is not a book I would have contemplated when I was 18 or 20 or 22 years old, even if I were a decent writer then. My feelings and sense about the American military then, I grew up in the late 1960s, early 1970s. It was the Vietnam War. And to say that my attitude about the American military then was skeptical is to be charitable. It was not where I was at. However, I'm not 18 or 20 or 22 anymore. And as I've grown up, and I see how the world is, and I see how the American military is, I've come to believe that the United States military is one of the greatest forces for good on planet Earth. We're a big country, we're a big military, we make mistakes. We're human, we make mistakes. But we try not to make mistakes, and the good that our military does is overwhelming. There is a reason that it is the most trusted institution in the United States today. So that's thematic. Then the specific. It was, well, thematically leads to something specific, which is that probably around 9/11, I started visiting national cemeteries on Memorial Day. When I lived in Tennessee, did it when I lived in Salt Lake City, the small one behind Fort Douglas, and in Los Angeles, where I live now, I go to the Los Angeles National Cemetery. And I was there on Memorial Day 2016 with my de facto wife and stepdaughter, and it was crowded. There were a lot of people there. Big ceremony, several thousand people. It was really pretty stirring to see. So to find a little piece, I wandered away from the main event and started walking amidst the headstones. And I looked down and I saw a headstone that said, unknown. And I walked a little further and I saw another headstone that said, unknown. I was surprised to see that in the Los Angeles National Cemetery. It flashed me back to when I was a teenager and visited the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington. I started thinking as I was walking about that tomb, how little I knew about it, how I was null on its founding, and I remembered the tomb guard sentinels doing their duty, walking their 21s on the mat, and I wondered, who are these men? How do they get to do this? What motivates them to be so precise and to do this kind of selfless service for their country? And by the time I left the cemetery that day, I was devoted to doing this book. Matt, have you been, what's your history with Arlington? Had you been when you were a boy or what?
Yeah, before doing this book, I knew pretty much nothing about it. I had been there once, just on my 8th grade field trip when we went to Washington D.C. But yeah, it was when I read Jeff's manuscript the first time, I was pretty blown away by it. Like it's so beautifully written and so powerful. But yeah, I had a lot to learn. I decided I wanted to do it right away. But
and where were you at on your knowledge of World War I?
Yeah,
Because
I've told you this before. Yeah,
it's embarrassing to talk about this now. But I was allegedly an American Studies major at Colby.
Yeah,
and I'm telling you, my knowledge of World War I was about zero as I went into this. Did you have any background at all?
no, I mean that's one of the things I love about making books. It's like especially as an illustrator, because by the time I came into this project, it was already written. You had already done all the heavy lifting and spent, years trying to get it just right. And and there, all of a sudden, I have this fascinating story that it's this topic that I never would have thought of pursuing on my own. So it's one thing I love about collaborating, with another writer.
So here's the crazy thing about World War I, which I learned as I was doing this because I knew not enough. I mean, this really was the United States' first united military effort. We had the Civil War, of course, but that was the epitome of disunion. This was national. We had soldiers from California and soldiers from Arizona, and soldiers from Native nations in Texas and New York and wherever. And it was a different world from today. You couldn't get from California to New York by airplane in 5 hours. I mean, it was an 8-day train ride to get there. And then to get to Europe was another 8 days. So the United States was not under threat with this. Our borders were secure. We had plenty of problems in the country. But to commit to go fight in Europe with a citizenry who had largely come from Europe and knew all about the bloodiness of its conflicts, this was pretty astounding.
Amazing
for us. And then, of course, then there's the story of how the tomb got established, which is, we weren't in a rush to do this here in the US. Our allies in Europe established tombs of the unknown well before we did. And the population here was clamoring for it because we lost 100,000 people dead and then thousands of unknowns and missing in action. So in 1921, we selected an unknown soldier. And it was quite a process. Don't talk about it really in the book, but exhumed soldiers who were unknown, put them in caskets, moved the caskets around, put them on the deck of a ship, and then a Medal of Honor winner. Didn't know where the caskets had come from, walked around, and he stopped at the third one and said, "This is the one."
Yeah, I remember learning about that. They wanted to make sure they didn't know
Right, they wanted to make
which one they
absolutely
selected
sure,
because they knew, where
absolutely sure that they didn't
each.
get it. Can you talk a little bit, Matt, about how you did the research for the, let me see if I can bring up the slide of the unknown soldier lying in state, okay, in the Capitol.
Mhm.
Let's see if we can do this. There it is, okay?
Yeah, for
Figure out
that
how to do
one.
this.
Well, there are historical photos of these. This was a big thing as it was happening. So it's always a good thing to research a time period since cameras have existed, because I could find pictures. I mean, I used the photos just to get the gist of how things were set up, but for the the crowd is pretty much made up. I know there was actually an earlier version of this illustration where the painting in the background, I think you might remember this because I think it was
I
maybe
sure
your
do, I
feedback.
remember it well.
There was a different painting, and I think it was either you or someone that was doing all. I mean, the historical editing that goes on is pretty impressive because
Yeah, I wasn't happy with
find
the
every little
painting. I
thing.
wasn't happy with the original painting in the background.
Right.
You're right.
I used the painting that would have actually been there from that angle, but we decided to use a different painting
Right.
that sort of captured the patriotic feel of the book that is also really in the Capitol Rotunda and is also historically accurate. But that was one, I feel like there are a lot of little things like that in the book that we tweaked and adjusted as we went, trying to make sure we got everything to feel just right.
Okay, so I'm gonna blow this up now and read this. Let's see if I can get to do this properly. Good. And then I'll talk a little bit about the voice in the book and why I did it the way I did it. It's a first person voice, which is not the way I started out writing this book. I started with an omniscient narrator. I had an idea that I was gonna take a family and send them to Washington, D.C. And the family was gonna have this great time. They'd go to the White House and the FBI, and the kid would play in the fountain. And then on the last day, they'd wake up and it would be like pounding rain. And the parents wanted to go to Arlington. And the youngster said, "No way, I'm going to a graveyard." And the parents made the kid go anyway. And at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in the amphitheater, this young boy or girl would have met a tomb guard and heard the story of the tomb. And I wrote it that way at first. And it wasn't very good. I was going to use an expletive. It was just not good enough. Then in conversation, I got the idea that maybe I should tell this from the point of view of the first unknown, and that broke the book open. So in 1921, one unknown returned to stand for all. I was transported by the Navy to Washington and lay in state in the Capitol, where an army of mourners filed past my casket. Many were families whose sons died nameless and faceless. As they knelt, prayed, and anointed my flag with tears, I felt their stories. The stories of a Boston kid who swung for the fences, a Texas boy who broke horses, a Choctaw Nation farmhand, a Nevada miner. In that moment, I became theirs. Matt, can you talk a little bit about how you built some of the art for this book? Because the art had to be super precise.
Yeah, that was definitely a little daunting, doing a book where, it's a book about the tomb guards whose standard is perfection. That's part of their motto. So I definitely wanted to make sure all those little details on their uniform and everything was as right as it could be. I will share my screen, and I'm gonna show a little behind the scenes of how I make my pictures. Hopefully you guys see the cover of the book there. So yeah, I'll take you through how I made the cover. I never just sit down and paint a picture, just like when Jeff writes his stories, and he might go back how many times and fix it and change it, where first you're telling this whole story about this kid and then you whittle it down to this one little part of that. That's pretty much how I write picture books too. It's like you start with a good 4,000 word first draft, and maybe you'll whittle it down to the best 500 or 800. So before I make my pictures, I do sketches. So I'll take you through, and Jeff's probably never seen these, take you through some of my, really get on the right spot here. So yeah, for the cover, I basically knew I wanted to show the tomb and a guard. So my first sketch, I had the tomb very big on the page with the guard walking past. I wasn't sure about that one. I felt like I wasn't sure where the words would fit, and it didn't have much weight to it. So I tried to zoom way out with the second sketch. Felt like I was getting there. I kept kind of tweaking it. I was for a while trying to make it work, having all the words on the ground, because I really wanted to focus on the steps, where the feet go. And if you look up close on the plaza, you can just see like there's rust, like there's marks from all the years of these steps in the same spots, continuously for the last however many years since 1937. So I kept kind of getting closer. I knew there was going to be a subtitle, but I wasn't sure what it would be, so I just kind of put words there to fill the space.
That's funny.
I think I wrote, I'm thinking there will probably be a subtitle, something like that. So here I was getting closer. So these are the ones I sent to my art director. The art director is a lot like the editor. Like we all kind of work together as a team, where the editor focuses more on the words. Art director is more focused on the visual stuff in the book. So I sent these two versions. I couldn't decide if I liked it better with the backs of some heads in the foreground. I mostly just showed some children up close watching. I heard back from the folks at Candlewick. They preferred the left sketch here. They had one suggestion, which was maybe I could extend it so it covers the whole front and the whole back of the book. So I did a new sketch for that one, and that's the one we decided on for the cover. So this is sort of the process of how I make my pictures. Usually I just go through a bunch of ideas till it feels right, and you keep kind of figuring out what's not quite right about it. Now, whenever I can, I like to go to the place where my story takes place. For this book, I actually signed a contract for it in 2017. So I had some time. I was working on a couple books before this one. So over those years, I took 3 trips to Arlington National Cemetery so I could see the tomb. I wanted to go at different times of year so I could see it, at different seasons. So I'll show you some of the pictures that I took. You can see how crowded it gets there. Just tried to kind of soak it in as much as I could and get as much visual reference. So then when I was back here in my studio drawing, I could remember what it looked like from different angles and different pictures of crowds and trees and all that stuff. Now, probably the most amazing part of my process of making this book was thanks to some of the connections Jeff had made when he was writing the story. I actually got to go spend an afternoon in the tomb guard quarters. This is where the guards stay when they're on duty. It's this sort of secret place underneath the building there that most people never get to see. So it was very, it was pretty amazing to get to go in there. And I got to talk with them and ask questions. And I tried to just be kind of a fly in the wall and just kind of soak in as much as I could. I have a little video here from that. And it's kind of hard to hear in this, but this was something I love. And I show this at schools when I talk to, when I do these Zoom presentations with kids at schools, because I think it's really good. These tomb guards are obsessed with making everything perfect. Their standard is perfection. And they're constantly checking for what they call gigs. And to them, a gig is a deficiency. actually, at one point, they kept saying the word gig. And at one point I said, so what is a gig? And they all in unison said, a gig is a deficiency. And then they all kind of laughed about it. But in this video, one of the tomb guards says, nobody likes to get gigged, but in a lot of ways, gigs are good because they make you better. And I thought that was such a cool thing to hear from him. Just they acknowledge, even though they spend their whole time trying to be as perfect as they possibly can, and they know that they never really are. And that's okay, that they're constantly striving to be more perfect. So here's a little, this is what it looks like in the tomb guard quarters. I think it was about 9 minutes before the changing of the guard. And as you get closer and closer, you can just feel it building, and they're all working together to get this one guard ready to go out there and walk the plaza. So you can kind of,
Look what a team effort it is to get one person out there.
they all work at it. Yep. This is where he says it. Last thing I'll show, here's how the cover art turned out. And for anyone that has the book, if you ever, there's one sort of secret picture that you only see if you have the hardcover copy. I wanted to really show that the guards are there 24 hours a day, day and night. So the cover is this sunrise image. But if you ever take the jacket off, underneath the jacket, it shows the same scene at nighttime. It's kind of a fun thing that I can do as the illustrator, just to sneak an extra picture in there. I know librarians don't like that sometimes because the jacket gets taped down and then you don't get to see it, but sometimes you could do like a Velcro or something. So I will, yeah, that's all I have here. Maybe we can get back
so let me talk a little bit about that quest for perfection and the way that I interpreted it in the text, and you'll see it in Matt's art as well. So I'm going to try and share, Matt, and get this to go again. Let's see if I can do this. Excellent. Okay. From that moment, which is the moment that the first tomb guard started their walk on July 2nd, 1937, I have never been alone again. No matter the hour or the weather, a sentinel guards the plaza. It is the most difficult post to earn in the army. Many fail for each one chosen. Those granted the privilege may walk the mat for 2 years. Everything they do honors the unknown fallen. They press their creases sharp as a razor, rehem their trousers so they lie just right, singe loose threads from their jacket's top stitching, space their medals down to 1/64th of an inch, practice keeping their forearms at 90 degrees, recount pages of cemetery history, set their hat brims 2 fingers above their eyes, dampen their gloves to better grip their rifles, march so their heads stay ever level, add metal to their heels for the sharpest click, polish their spits for hours every day. Remember interviewing a tomb guard named Colin Anthony during my research, and he said that the biggest question that he gets is, isn't this all just too much? The wetting of the gloves and the polishing of the weapon and the shining the shoes and the medals at 1/64th of an inch and the top stitching and running a lighter over your blouse to singe away any loose threads. And he told me, Jeff, the unknown gave everything. The least that I can give is my very, very best for 2 years. And so there are values that are in what the tomb guards are doing. There's admiration in their pants crease, duty in their hems, focus in their top stitching, gratitude between the metals, reverence in the angle of their rifles, discipline in their learning, respect in their hat brims, fidelity in their gloves, appreciation in their step, devotion in their heel clicks, and love in their gleaming spits. And it's true. It's true. You meet, I mean, Matt, you've met them, right? And these are extraordinary young men and women. Didn't you think?
Yeah, it was so impressive just to see them doing their jobs, and just the focus that is required, and the way they worked as a team was really impressive too, as you could see in that little video. I mean, that's how it was the whole time. Like every half hour, it's sort of this whole, every minute is there's precision to it. Whether you're 18 minutes out or 12 minutes out or 3 minutes out, they all know what they need to be doing. And it was very impressive to see up close.
And there's something about the anonymity of it that inspired me as I was writing, inspired me to want to write this book, and inspires me whenever I think about the two. You know,
I don't know if you found this too, but when I was there, I tried to take down all their names so we could thank them, and they were very hesitant.
Very.
Like I did eventually, get a few of their names, but I kind of realized I probably shouldn't keep bugging them about this, because they seemed uncomfortable even saying their first names, or they would give their last name.
But here's the thing, and it's a bit of an outlier in 2021, that I've had kids ask me, like, wouldn't it be better if we knew who the unknown was? And I always respond, I don't know that it would be better. I actually don't think it would be better. You'd think that you might, if you're from the same identity group or the same state or so, the same unit, you feel like you have more of a claim. In the anonymity of the unknown soldier, that soldier belongs to all of us.
I think you really captured that in the book, like where you say, in that moment I became theirs.
Right, and then the tomb guards, in their quest for perfection, and walking on them, they want to be it's not a place for creativity,
Right.
They want to be just like the tomb guard who came before, and just like the tomb guard who's going to come after. And they'd like to be, as Colin Anthony told me, yeah, it's true. I know that people will come to the plaza and they want to see the show. But if at one instant when they're there, they can look through me, and nothing I'm doing is calling special attention to myself, and they can look through me to the tomb and think about the tomb and the unknown, then I've done my job properly.
Yep.
Good. So maybe we'll take some questions if there are some.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise, I can interview us for another hour.
Yeah, whoever has questions, send them our way.
Fascinating. Thank you both so much. I am just so intrigued by both of the way this whole book was put together. And I love the story that you started out with a completely different idea for narration, but how perfect that you did come round to the unknown soldier. That's just fabulous. And Matt, I just am laughing about your subtitle, putting that in. It's so inspired. As a non-artist, I would never think to do that.
Okay, so this is true about Matt. So Candlewick bought my book, and Matt and I were friends on Facebook. And Matt, like in early 2017, like put up a Facebook message of put up a post like, I just signed a 4-book thing with Candlewick. And I'm like, dear God, please, please, please. And it was one of them.
Yeah. Oh, good. I didn't know if you knew at that point. Yeah.
I didn't know. Okay, questions.
We'll switch over to the audience Q&A, and I do just want to remind the audience that there's still time to add a question if you have one. Jeff, I just wanted to ask you before we got started on the audience Q&A, can you tell us a little bit more about the process of getting chosen to be a guard?
Yes, it's incredibly difficult. As I said in the text, it's the hardest post for an enlisted man to get in the Army. It's harder than becoming a Green Beret, or becoming an Army Ranger. First, you need to be enlisted. They're not officers. Okay. Secondly, you need to become part of the famed 3rd Regiment, which is called the Old Guard, which is the military ceremonial unit. So when there's a funeral at Arlington, it's conducted by the Old Guard. When a visiting head of state comes and there's all the pomp and circumstance, that's the Old Guard. Then you can apply to become a Tomb Guard. It's incredibly tough. You get tested constantly. You're tested on 3 different aspects of being a guard. Number 1 is your preparation in the quarters, your uniform, your shoes, your weapon, your bayonet, your metal spacing. Secondly, you're tested on tomb history, and it's not 10 bullet points about Arlington. It's 35 single-space pages of tomb history that you need to recite, including the punctuation. And then third, you're tested for your performance on the mat, how you're walking, counting your 21s, executing a guard change. You have to be able to execute the guard change actually without commands, because it's possible that there could be a funeral going on down below the tomb, and they don't want to interrupt the funeral with audible commands, so they do it with heel clicks. You need to pass all of your tests at 95%. You're allowed to fail one test one time. Beyond that,
Intense.
that's it.
Wow.
So there's 3. Yeah, it's incredibly hard to become a tomb guard. You can do it for up to 2 years, and then generally people will move on to different positions in the military or go back to civilian life.
Right, right. Wow. Well, thank you for explaining that. This kind of leads into this question from Katie. It says, can you talk about the significance of 21 steps? What is it based on?
Yeah. So look, allegedly, I don't know if this story is apocryphal or not. Allegedly, the tradition traces back about 600 or 700 years, when a sailing warship would enter a port in peace. It typically had 7 cannons on deck. That was standard. And it would fire those 7 cannons, one after another, out to sea to clear the barrels. And then the shore battery, which could reload more quickly, would fire 21 blanks in return. And that signified that the vessel was coming in peace, and that the shore battery was awaiting in peace. That number became an honorific, and it is reserved for the president. So you may have heard 21 shots at the inauguration if you watched the sequence with President Biden and Vice President Harris at the tomb, a foreign head of state, and the unknown soldiers. That's it.
Wow, got it. Yeah, thank you. And another question, and you touched on this a little bit, but this is for both of you. Were there things you found doing your research that you were surprised about? And the other question is, was there anything you weren't able to include? And I don't know if Jeff, if you want to take the question first.
Was there material that I wasn't able to include?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also anything that you were surprised by in the research, but do one of them first.
Okay. So I was surprised by the process by which the unknown was chosen. I had no idea that it was as careful as it was. And then the unknowns for World War II in Korea. So World War II, World War I, we had one theater, Europe. World War II, they disinterred unknown soldiers from the Pacific Theater and from Europe, chose a few, mixed them together, and then picked one. And I don't address the selection process at all in the book. It's interesting, but picture books, as Matt will tell you, is what you leave out, not
Mm.
not what you put in. So that was surprising to me. And then the second part of the question was,
Was there anything you had to leave out? And you've kind of
yeah.
addressed
So
that a little bit.
the selection process I had to
Yeah.
leave out. And then look, it's a picture book. I've got 850 words, so you have to write in this sort of poetic shorthand, probably the same way you have to draw in poetic shorthand. You can't show everything, much as you might like to, but picture books are not documentaries. What about
Yeah,
you,
I mean,
Jeff? Anything that you wanted to draw that you didn't get to have?
yeah, I feel like that's always the challenge of doing a nonfiction picture book, is you have to gather all this information and you find so many interesting things, but it just doesn't fit, or else you'd end up with this scattered mess of a book if you try to fit it all in there somehow. So yeah, I guess the biggest thing for me was just the time I spent with the tomb guards. I feel like I could have done a whole book of just like an afternoon with the tomb guards and just getting into every little part of that, where ultimately in the book, there's only one illustration that shows the tomb guard quarters.
What was
And I
that thing you told me about not acknowledging the furniture? Did you see that? Was that you?
What was, I don't know if I know what that.
That like if you're like in training and you're in the tomb guard quarters, you're not allowed to sit down, or
I don't think I told you that. I
all right,
didn't hear
somebody
that.
told me that. Yeah,
No,
basically
it might be. There's probably
your first
some
several
level
weeks there,
amazing.
don't acknowledge the television and don't acknowledge the furniture.
There was something about the the screen that was off limits, but yeah, I forget that part. But yeah, it was I had this one illustration, so I ended up sort of combining a few different moments into that one scene. But yeah, I felt like I could have gone on for a whole book just about what they do just to get ready to get out on the mat.
Right. One more surprising thing that I didn't know and would stop me in my tracks is, if you were a tomb guard, you were a tomb guard for life.
Mm.
And after you leave your duty, okay, if you commit a crime of look, if you get a traffic ticket, it's not a big deal. If you get arrested for drunk driving and convicted, they may take your name off the plaque, and simply your badge number will be there, and it will say removed. You are expected to uphold to a certain standard of conduct lifelong.
Right. One question from Sam, and the question is there only one unknown?
No. So we have 3, and at one point we had 4. So the first unknown is from World War I. After World War II, we were committed to bringing home an unknown. Then the Korean conflict broke out, and it was not the time to bury an unknown soldier from World War II. So we waited. Following the armistice in Korea, we brought home an unknown from World War II, and we brought home an unknown from Korea. They were buried at the same time. In fact, Matt has a spread of that burial with General Eisenhower, who was president at that time. And there were 3 up to Vietnam. We brought home a Vietnam unknown in the middle of the Reagan presidency, if I'm not mistaken. And he was interred, so we had 4. Through DNA evidence that was developed while he was in the crypt and some other investigation, he was identified. And there was no hesitation at that point. He was disinterred, returned to his family, and I believe he's buried in a national cemetery in Ohio now. So we have 3, and the science is such that there will only be 3.
And there will never be another.
That's
You're right. I mean, that's
right.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Let me just double check questions here. This is for you, Matt. The question is, what medium did you do this art in? And a comment, it's beautiful.
Well,
Would I
thank you.
agree?
Thank you. Yeah, this was something somewhat new for me. I've been doing my sketches digitally for years, but then the final art in all my picture books before the last couple was done the old-fashioned way with watercolor mostly and gouache and pencil. But for this one, I actually did I drew everything with pencil, and then I scanned in all the different elements of the illustration, and then all the color is painted in Photoshop. So it's something I've kind of been practicing over the years to the point where I'm comfortable now painting that way. And I mean, the digital painting tools that have been developed at this point, they're so amazing. Like it just feels like I'm painting. Only in some ways I'm looser with it because there's not that risk of just destroying your picture if you try something and it doesn't work. So it's kind of a fun way to paint.
Right.
And like for the looking at the cover of 21 Steps, like if I decide the soldier is a little too far to the right, the tomb guard, I can move the tomb guard, which I can't do on a piece of paper. So there's some benefits to it. But yeah, all the color is painted right in the computer.
When did you decide that that sunrise was perfect? I mean, it's like,
The
it's
sunrise, I don't think I
amazing.
told you this.
The colors.
That sky,
Yes.
that is from one of my walks. I take a walk every day, and whenever I see a good sky, I'll take a picture of it. So I have a whole collection of good sky pictures. And that was just a sunrise that I thought like it just had everything, and it just felt like it was perfect for the cover.
Yes, it was perfect.
Thank you.
That's great. Yeah, I was curious. You said that you had visited Arlington Cemetery during different seasons. I mean, did the guards ever comment on having to be there in sort of bitter weather or cold weather or in the extreme heat?
Yeah, I
They
did ask them about that. I think it's sort of like a badge of honor in a way to go out there in the middle of a blizzard, go out there when it's 100 degrees and you're still, it's they have a heavier coat in the winter and they have a fur hat and everything, but it's still like, it's not easy. Like they're out there in all weather, like every historic storm that's come through, they're walking the whole time. But I think they like in a way.
The book ends with a poem, which is, and the spread before it is a guard walking in the sleet in the dead of night with no audience, listening for the voices of the unknowns on the howling wind. And that was not my idea. I heard a tomb guard tell me that when you are out there at night and the wind is howling, you're listening and you can hear them.
Oh, that's amazing. Just one last question before we wind down. Jeff, I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to the Sentinels Creed that you include in the front of the book.
Yes. That was a bit of an artistic risk to put it there, but I thought that it needed to go there. So in 1971, somebody left a poem on the front, by the front door of the tomb guard quarters. The person who left that poem identified herself or himself only as Simon. Could be a first name, could be a last name, nobody knows, fittingly. And the Sentinels Creed, and I wish I had it right in front of me, I'd read it, is a poem that talks about the Sentinels' point of view in executing their duty. And it has the famous thing called line 6, which is our standard shall remain perfection. And when you talk to guards, and I'm sure Matt heard this when he was down in the quarters, it's line 6, line 6, line 6, over and over when something is not exactly right. And we invoked line 6 a few times as we were working on this book, maybe to the annoyance of Candlewick, but it was worth it in the long run.
I think perfection is the word for the book.
Thank you so much.
It's really wonderful. So I think that's about time for all the questions. So I want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us tonight in the great questions, and also especially thanks to Jeff and Matt for joining us this evening. Don't forget, you can still click the link in the chat box to get your copy of 21 Steps. And our stores are open, or you can always order online or call the store. And you can also watch past events on our Politics in Prose YouTube page. Thanks again, everyone. Keep reading widely and expanding your world.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.